Hi, and welcome to part 3 of Deep Rest, Hasidic interpretations of the mitzvah of Shemitah, the sabbatical year. Today we're going to meet a remarkable character, and we're going to study his works, a Hasidic Rebbe who had a very unusual history, and we're going to study his interpretation under the particular circumstances he was living in, his interpretation of the mitzvah of Shemitah. Today we're going to meet Kalanimus Kalman Shapira, otherwise known as the Eish Kodesh. That might be backwards on your screen. If it is, I apologize. But the Eish Kodesh. The Eish Kodesh is a book that collected the writings of Rabbi Shapira that were, the talks that he was, of Rabbi Shapira that were given during the Warsaw Ghetto occupation and uprising. And let me read to you, I'm going to read to you from Wikipedia, and I'll put it up on your screen as well. Let me read to you about Rabbi Shapira. Kalanimus Kalman Shapiro was the Grand Rabbi of Piaseczna and authored a number of works and was murdered by the Nazis during the Shoah. Kalanimus Kalman Shapiro was born in, I don't know how to pronounce it, Poland, to his father, the Imre Elimelech of Grudzinsk. It was very significant. His yichus is very significant. Named after his maternal great-grandfather, the renowned Maor Vashemesh. He was the scion of a distinguished family, which included Rav Elimelech of Lezhensk, was a student of the Baal Shem Tov, the Chozeh of Lublin, and the Maggid of Koznitz. These are major figures in early Hasidus. The Rebbe was born on the day after Lag BaOmer. It's remarkable that on his what would have been his 121st birthday, we are studying his works. He was born on the day after Lag BaOmer in 5649. Translating that 121 years, I guess that's 1899, I apologize. And at the age of 3, he was orphaned by the death of his father. Let's move on. In 1909, he was appointed rabbi of Piaseczna near Warsaw and subsequently attracted many Hasidim. He was deeply focused on the education of children and young men, establishing the yeshiva Da'as Moshe in 1923, which became one of the largest Hasidic yeshivot in Warsaw between the wars. Let's continue on to the war years. Rabbi Shapira's only son, his daughter-in-law, and his sister-in-law were killed during the Nazi aerial bombings of Warsaw in September 1939. After the invasion of Poland, Rabbi Shapira was interned with a few of his Hasidim in the Warsaw Ghetto, where he ran a secret synagogue. He invested enormous efforts in maintaining Jewish life in the ghetto, including arranging for mikveh immersions and kosher marriages. Rabbi Shapiro was able to survive in the ghetto until its liquidation, avoiding the tragic deportations to Treblinka in the summer of 1942 because of the support of the Judenrat. Like other notables, he was given work at Schultz's shoe factory, a path to ongoing survival. Rabbi Shapiro is especially well known because of a book he wrote while in the ghetto. The book, which is a compilation of weekly sermons to his students, contends with complex questions of faith in the face of the mounting suffering of the Jews in the ghetto. When it became apparent to Rabbi Shapira that the end of the ghetto and all its inhabitants was near, he buried the book in a canister as part of the Ringelblum archive. This canister was found by a construction worker at the end of the war. The book, originally simply entitled Torah Innovations from the years 5700 to 5702, was published in Israel in 1960 under the title Eish Kodesh. After the Warsaw Ghetto uprising was crushed in 1943, Rabbi Shapiro was taken to the Troniki work camp near Lublin, and there are more details here, but during the operation to liquidate the Jews in Troniki, Rabbi Shapiro was shot to death on November 3rd, 1943. He had many works. His legacy is very significant. Amongst his legacy, there is a congregation called Eish Kodesh, which was founded in 1992 to his memory, and the first synagogue by his name. It happens to be located in my hometown of Woodmere, New York, and I've had the pleasure of davening there and having great spiritual elevation there, actually, a number of times. So that is the history of the Eish Kodesh. And I'm going to read to you, I don't have an English translation of the Eish Kodesh, but I'm going to read to you his selection on our Torah portion. and explain it as we go along. So at the beginning of our Torah portion, the first verse, and we mentioned this the first class, the first verse is an unusual verse in that it doesn't merely say that God spoke to Moshe, but says that God spoke to Moshe at Har Sinai, at Mount Sinai. Now really, Mount Sinai, there were a lot of things that were told over by God to Moses at Mount Sinai. So why is this specifically the one? So Rashi explains, based on a midrash, Rashi explains that it's coming to teach you a broader lesson of a connection between Sinai and the sabbatical year. Rashi's connection that he mentions is that the details, all of the details, just like the Shemitah was given with its many details in the Torah, so too all the mitzvahs in the Torah have details, whether they spell them out or not. The details were given at Mount Sinai, just as all the details were given at Mount Sinai for Shemitah and Yovel for the sabbatical year and the Jubilee year, so too it was given at Mount Sinai for all of the mitzvos. Now Rav Shapiro says as follows. Rav Shapiro says that a person wants to connect to God. It says in Shir in the Song of Songs, Ani l'dodi v'dodi li, I am my beloved and my beloved is to me. And it says also, I am to my beloved, v'olai teshukaso, and to him is my desire. So simply put, it could have just said, v'olai teshukaso. It could have said, my desire is to God. Okay, let me back up. The first verse that's mentioned is, I am to my beloved and my beloved is to me. The second verse later on, it says, I am to my beloved and my desire is upon him. So the Eish Kodesh asks, it should be the reverse. The desire should come first, right? Ani l'dodi, I am to my beloved and I'm filled with desire, and then v'dodi li. So he wants to understand why it's expressed in the reverse order here. And he says as follows. When a Jew gives himself over to God, even if he is not yet worthy of doing so, still, when he gives himself over based on, person says, look, I'm not really what I should be. That could be, but I give myself over to God and I rely on the covenant that we have with our fathers and at the receiving of the Torah. I rely on those covenants that God is going to accept me and let me come close to God, even though I might not be so worthy. Now, if a person gives himself over several times, so then, says the Eish Kodesh, then eventually God will want you. Right? When you give yourself over, when you say, I'm with you, God, I want you, God, I want a relationship with you, so then it'll come back to you. Now he says, when the Jewish people are tragically in a difficult time, and in particular, and now I'll read to you, B'prat b'tzara kazu, and in particular in such a time of suffering, sheroim sheloheim ba'atzmam v'lo zulasam yachol hoshia, where we realize that we can't save ourselves. Raku yisparach ba'atzmo yachol hoshia, only God can save us from this terrible situation. Kvarhem nesunem es atzmam b'leiv shalem shuka elav yisparach. That's giving ourselves over to God. When we say, listen, I know human agency isn't going to help me. Only God can help me. So now we've given ourselves over to God, and we should expect reciprocity. God should come back to us, so to speak. We need to be deeply aware of how bad our current situation is. And how right now we're saying, oh, if God would only save us, then we would serve God and we would pray and we would study Torah. Right? We would do all of those things. Right? Because, and here's there's such an interesting thing he says. Listen, we're not davening that we should be able to eat again. I mean, that's obvious. We need to eat. right? So we're not davening, saying, oh, if God would only save us, then we would be able to eat more. Right? God saves us, we'll be able to eat. Okay, we'll be able to eat. We won't be starving anymore. But what we're really asking is that God should save us for a higher purpose. We should be able to be done with this distraction, whatever terrible things are going on, and be able to focus once again on the service of God. Now, says the Eish Kodesh, he says, look, you've got people that think to themselves, I didn't do anything wrong. There's nothing more for me to do. What do you mean? After all, am I a person who doesn't do the right thing? I daven and I study Torah and I do the mitzvot. So what is it that I'd be recommitting to? What's the upgrade, so to speak? Right, I do everything. Says the Eish Kodesh, Aval tzrichim lodas, we need to know shegam tolui eich manichem tefillin. It also matters how you put on the tefillin. The fact that you put on the tefillin, if the intent isn't correct, if you don't have the right intentions, eich mispalim, how are we davening? Are we just beh, 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 beh? Or are we putting our hearts into it? Bameh mavlin es haShabbos. What are we doing to enhance the Shabbos? The echoskim b'Torah, and how are we being involved in Torah? Are we just learning, or do we care? So the Eish Kodesh is saying that it's not just a question of doing the right thing, it's doing it the right way, doing it with the right intentions. And now he says, Ki roim shegam ala pratim. We see that when it comes to the specifics, that God gave the specifics over to the Jewish people at Mount Sinai as well. What do I mean? He says, there's a famous medrash that at Mount Sinai, the Jewish people, they might have been a little reluctant. So what did God do? Kafa aleim har kagigas. God held the mountain over their heads and basically said, if you accept the Torah, great. And if not, that's it for you. Now, what was God saying when he said accept the Torah? So according to the Eish Kodesh, when God was saying that, he quotes a midrash which says that was referring not to accepting the written Torah, but to accepting the oral Torah, because there are many particulars. And now the Eish Kodesh wraps up his idea. That which is hinted to us, that the Torah and its details, and as far as the Eish Kodesh is concerned, not only doing the mitzvos and their particulars, but doing them in the right way, with the right enthusiasm and the right intentions. All of this was Sinai. All of this came from Sinai. That which God held the mountain over us was, listen, if you're just going to say yes, 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 I'll take the deal, and you're just going to go through the motions, God says, I'm not interested. That's not the passion of Adi the Dodi v'Dodi li. I am my beloved and my beloved is to me. To have that passion, we have to do things in the right way. We have to strive as much as possible to do the details, which for the Eish Kodesh means the right intentions, the right enthusiasm. And when we do that, then the Torah guarantees us, says the Eish Kodesh, guarantees us that we will have 6 years you will plant your fields. In 6 years you will prune your vineyards, and then you will collect the fruit. The Torah says, God said to Moshe at Sinai, say to the Jewish people, right? And what God says is 6 years, great. 7 years Shemitah, you'll be able to have all of those things. When will you have all of those things, says the Eish Kodesh? Vaydaber Hashem al Moshe Bahar Sinai Lamor. When you understand that Shemitah is connected to Har Sinai, when you understand that as long as you have Har Sinai, you'll have Shemitah. As long as you do that which God held a mountain over us for, i.e., do what God wants, but do it with enthusiasm and to care about it, and to do it with the right intention, as long as you do that, you'll have Shemitah. But if you fail to do that, and the implicit criticism here, which is not infrequent from the Eish Kodesh, is that so many people around them are either going through the motions or have left Judaism entirely. If you fail to do that, Shem Te'ek Furaschem, it's going to lead to your demise. Shetia lecha soda keren v'tavo v'tispa lechem. You'll be filled with bread v'chol tov and all good things. Ki al zeh gam bahai alma nostim schar. This is something which can come to us in this world. If we do things with the right intention and the right enthusiasm, then we will have fields and vineyards and prosperity. So for the Eish Kodesh in this speech, what he is saying to his followers is when the Torah connects Har Sinai and Shemitah, what it's saying is as follows. When you do things the way that you were committed to do them at Mount Sinai, which means not only observing the commandments, but observing the commandments with proper intention and to care about it and to be enthusiastic about it. When we have that enthusiasm and that care, when we have that going, then everything falls into place. Then we'll have Shemitah. And in the absence thereof, we find ourselves, says the Eish Kodesh, in this terrible situation of confinement in the Warsaw Ghetto. This is the interpretation of the great Hasidic Rebbe of the Eish Kodesh, and it points us in a direction, again, of seeing the connections and how connections are made. This is something that's really typical of Hasidus. He uses this connection to emphasize the point that Hasidus makes all the time. It's not good enough to daven blah, 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 and to learn blah, 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 and to do mitzvot blah, 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 but rather we need to do it with an internal spark and an enthusiasm. That's the joy, doing it with joy. That's the very joy of Hasidus. He connects that joy here to Mount Sinai and to the mitzvah of Shemitah, giving us yet another perspective on another Hasidic insight into the mitzvah of Shemitah. So glad you were with us for these 3 sessions. And God willing, through our enthusiasm and our doing things the right way and our doing things with joy, we should see the prosperity that right now is threatened in our current moment, but we should be able to see it once again. And we should all be able to enjoy all of the blessings which God has in store for us, if only we come to God with passion, ve'elav teshukaso, if we come to God with passion and repeatedly approach until we feel that passion and God feels that passion. If we do that, God willing, all will be well. Thanks for being with us.